Everyone. I wanted to do a little video about the journey that we've been on with my son and his mental health, and what I've done that has worked really well, and the feedback that I've got from other people who have used a similar approach after I mentioned it. So I want to talk about this. So basically, I won't go through the whole thing because it's quite a long journey we've been on. We've had quite a few years of being in a very hard position with my son, especially there was a 2.5 year window that was exceptionally bad. Within my son's journey, it's hard to know where to start with it. It's all so complicated, really. It's quite a long-winded thing, but basically, Um, he was always relatively quirky, would have a lot of tantrums. Looking back, I just thought it was his nature. He did struggle a lot with a lot of what we did, but we kind of muddled through it. It wasn't severe enough. And then COVID hit, and he decided he wouldn't touch any food that wasn't wrapped in plastic. He went really quite extreme in his behaviour. Um, and he really wasn't able to function. He didn't eat for days. He wouldn't drink water for days. It was horrific. Um, then we kind of just about muddled through it all, and there were great moments in it all, of course. But he couldn't do schoolwork. That was all too much to ask of him. And then when school went back, he struggled with that, and it got harder and harder, and he'd wear socks on his hands and just strange things. Anyway, it got to the point where his OCD was really bad, and he couldn't go in a certain direction because he'd see grid lines, and if someone had walked in the grid line that he'd seen, he couldn't move, and he'd literally just stay frozen in a position for like an hour and a half. He wasn't easy to move or to get him to do what you wanted him to do. He wouldn't, basically. And the more you asked him to do something, the more rigid he got in what he was doing, and the froze in his being. Anyway, we got to a point where we couldn't get him into school because he couldn't get dressed. He was not changing his clothes. He would put clean clothes on top of dirty clothes. I mean, it was horrendous. It was just horrible. One day the school said, called up, I said, I can't get him in. And they said, well, you have to bring him in or you're going to have the education officers on your back. And I was like, well, we can't unless it's by force. And the head at the time said, bring him in. So my husband had to hold him. He's in his pajamas. I had to drive the car about 10 minutes from the school, clothes in a bag. The head said, bring him into my office. He's screaming like a wild animal. It's horrendous. But we thought, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. We've got to do this. We've got to do this. So we brought him in. Head said, shut the door. His fingers were in the door. Obviously, no one knew that. Heavy outside fire door. And his two fingers almost got chopped off. So we then had to rush him to hospital, go through that ordeal. Then he came home from the hospital. He wanted to unwrap his bandage and see what had happened, obviously. Wouldn't let anyone go near it, to clean it or anything like that. Anyway, we got to he was having surgery, went in, managed to get him there. He refused to wear shoes, but I managed to finally do that because he wouldn't wear shoes. He wouldn't wear anything if someone had touched it. I mean, it was horrendous. Oh, it seems a long way from where we are now, thank God. They gave him midazolam in hospital as a pre-med. He had a very bad reaction to that and just went ballistic. Very angry, violent reaction. It was horrendous. Anyway, fell asleep then quickly, went in for surgery, came out, lost it. As soon as he woke up, he had a cannula in his hand. He started freaking out, trying to just smashing his hand against. I mean, it was horrendous. An hour and a half, we couldn't contain him. I couldn't keep him safe. He was a danger to himself and me and everyone else. 6 security guards had to pin him down and inject him. After about 45 minutes, he then started to calm down. It's 10:30 at night at this point. He hadn't eaten anything because he'd had surgery. Eaten nothing all day. So he sat and ate like a wild animal and then curled up on me and fell asleep. And I said to the hospital, I said, I need to get him out of here. I have to get him out of here. And they said, you can't because he's had all this medication. Might be dangerous. So I was like, oh God. Anyway, I'm a nervous wreck at that point. So jittery, it was horrendous. Um, didn't sleep. He woke up at 2 and just kicked off again. And I just had to leave the room. I was throwing up. I was so stressed out and upset. And they had to inject him again because we couldn't calm him down. And then I called my husband at 5 in the morning and I said, you have to come. You have to take us out of here. I can't go through this anymore. So he came because it was COVID time, so you were only allowed one parent in the hospital. I think if he had been there, he could have like restrained him and we wouldn't have had to go through any of that. But hey ho, it's happened, and these things happen for a reason. Anyway, he wakes up when my husband picks him up and starts to fight, and it's like, we're taking you home, it's okay, we've got him out. My husband had to just hold him in the car whilst I'm driving, no sleep, like a mess. But we got back, and the only thing that regulated him was the screen. It was Minecraft. At the time we were really strict on the screen, but it was like whatever, that all went out the window. And for a month I was black and blue with, he would just beat me up constantly. You couldn't talk to him, you couldn't ask him to do anything, no, anything. He was literally like a wild animal, barely eating. Anyway, we got through that. I decided we weren't sending him back to school and that we would homeschool and rebuild him. That was my aim, to rebuild him back to, some form of something. And it was a really slow process. He wouldn't eat anything that wasn't wrapped in plastic. He would refuse to then talk to my husband at the end of that summer. And we had a year and a half where he wouldn't talk to his father, my husband, living in the same house. Wouldn't even see him, not just talk to him, wouldn't even see him. If he heard him, he wouldn't eat food. He'd throw things on the floor. I mean, it was horrendous. Literally all his kind of trauma, I think he just projected onto him. So I had to go out to the shops 3 times a day with him and get food, which he wouldn't then eat in the house. So hard. Anyway, we did some homeschooling things. There were a few things that he managed to do. He wasn't sleeping, 4 or 5 in the morning maybe. Sometimes a bit earlier, but generally not. Sometimes he'd go for over 24 hours without sleeping. We had an early intervention team in place. He started to see an art therapist, which was great. I managed to start to get him to that. This was all after, it's slow, gradual things that you can add in, but just couldn't put demands on him. So then I found out about the potential of it being PDA and looked into low demand living. So that's what we started to do, and that really seemed to help him. At the same time, he started to open up a little bit about what food he was having. And so I was able to get him at night this bottle of squash, like Volvic do this like squash. It's already mixed up. And I could open that and put stuff in and seal it, and he wouldn't notice that the seal had been broken. And I'd known all along that I needed to get the mushrooms in him. I didn't know how I was going to manage it, but I knew I needed to. And it was at this point I started to get the mushrooms in. And the mushrooms made such a big difference. I also looked into the Bach flower remedies and got someone to create a mix of 4 different remedies for him. And that was amazing. That made such a difference. The combination of the Bach flower remedies and the medicinal mushrooms. So I had this mushroom tincture created for me, and it's got reishi, chaga, lion's mane, cordyceps, and turkey tails. So I started putting this into his drink. And within a month of him having it and the Bach flower remedies, such huge differences started to occur in him. The edge just came off, the violence stopped, the swearing, which was so horrendous, the abuse I would get, which was just unbelievable, started to reduce. And I was like, something's working, this is great. I started to, his food then, he started to open up and let me make him more stuff. So I started getting VSL3 in, which is a probiotic, so I'd put that in. and I was able to mix that in. It's a powder because the gut has such a huge link to the brain. So I started to get that in, and that then opened things up even more. And a month after taking that, he was asking me for carrot sticks and cucumber sticks. And this was a boy who for 2.5 years or something was literally living on pizza, Indian takeaway, and baguettes and nut butter. And that was pretty much about it. And as a nutritionist, that was killing me. But he was eating, and for me at the time, that was all that mattered. Oh, and crisps and chocolate bars. I didn't care what he was eating because I just wanted him to eat, so he had something in him. It's quite emotional. It's quite hard when you look back over the journey and the hell that we lived through. There were so many days I didn't know how I was going to get through. Didn't know how I was going to cope because it was all on me, because he wouldn't talk to Giles, my husband. Wouldn't have anything to do with him. So it was a full-on intense thing. And I started to up the mushrooms. I started to then add in, as he opened up his diet, a few other things, which I think had a really big difference. All you need superfoods. This is like a protein and everything in one powder. And I started to put that into porridge and pancakes because he was letting me make him those. That's got vitamin D, magnesium, medicinal mushrooms, super greens, B12, all of these things, because he wasn't taking any supplements or anything. So that then started to make another big difference. But the mushrooms were kind of the cornerstone of it all. I really feel that. And the Bach flower remedies. So come last January, come September, he decided he wanted to go back to school. So we started him back at school. He wasn't getting in till the school were amazing. Some days he wouldn't make it in till 2:30, and he was literally there for half an hour. They let him stay in the after school club, so at least he had a bit more time, and they would feed him in school because he would eat there. So at least I had a little bit of pressure taken off me. And then come the January, he started to, we were giving him, so we got prescribed melatonin from the doctor. Melatonin that they gave him made him very angry, but he got the prescription and they said he needs melatonin. I found this melatonin. It's a liquid melatonin, and I could spray that, because part of the thing is he wouldn't, if I said you need to take this, he wouldn't take it because that was a demand on him. So I started spraying this. It's got no taste, into his tea at night time, along with the mushrooms, along with some CBD, which I'd put in there. I've got a CBD oil, which is this here, Herbal Trinity. It's CBD, medicinal mushrooms, and cacao. So I'd put a drop of that in. Can't put a lot because it's an oil and it separates. Or I'd put that into his food and he wouldn't notice. But I had to add that one in slowly because that's got a taste, whereas the other things don't have a taste, so they could be covered. The mushroom tincture in the squash, no taste, and also in tea. So he liked a rooibos tea then at night time, and it tastes a bit like tea, so that was perfect, along with the probiotics, which fully dissolve, so he couldn't tell that he was having anything. And with the melatonin, his bedtime started to come down. So by January, he started to get into school relatively on time, around 9, which is great. From 2 o'clock, we started to put it down and try and bring it back, slowly. And the school support was just absolutely amazing. They just held him and didn't put demands on him and supported him to be able to do this, whilst I'm working behind the scenes to try and make it all happen as well. Low demands at home, getting these supplements into him. Also adding in the clean slate heavy metal detox. So I started putting that in again as well, so that we could get the heavy metals out of his system, because heavy metals can be responsible for a lot of these things. So I was like, let's rule out, in my kind of nutritional way, let's rule out any potential deficiencies and anything like that that's going to be exacerbating any situation, any neurodiverse issues going on. Let's just bring everything down so that his body can function the best way it can. And when you look at that, it's B vitamins are really important, but methyl B vitamins, because a lot of people on the spectrum can't methylate B vitamins. So then what's happening is, and if the B vitamins help your body to detoxify. So what I've seen is that a lot of kids have this MTFHR gene mutation, which means they can't methylate B vitamins, which means their body can't detoxify properly, which means they've got more heavy metals, they've got more toxins in their system, which affect the brain and make it harder to concentrate, function, and just process. So got him on a B supplement that's brilliant, that have all methyl B vitamins in there. So that's great. So that was another step. You know, it's stepping stones with all of these things, and it all adds up to the full picture. But very interestingly, a lot of parents I've been working with have just done this mushroom tincture and the Bach flower remedies, or just the mushroom tincture, and had such huge results with them. It's phenomenal, you know. It's like, why do we not all know about this? Why do we not? Why is this not more known, that we can use these things like the medicinal mushrooms to really help our brain function better? So I'll talk about them in a minute more. I'll just kind of go through my journey so that you know where it's all gone. So now we've come to the end of term. He got the most glowing reports about how well he's done in school. And that is down to the school and down to us and down to him. You know, it's down to the school's support, which was phenomenal. He's had moments where I've seen that blackness overtake him. It's literally like this black cloud descends over him, and you can see him that he can't think, he can't process, and it's all too much for him. And then when he gets anxious and overwhelmed at the inability to process, he gets angry and he swears. That's his way of dealing with it, or slamming doors or throwing things down. It's very, the anger is how it comes out. So recently he had so when SATS week happened, he was fine through the SATS week. I was dosing him up on the mushrooms and the CBD. And I've got a product called CBD hot chocolate. And I was giving him a hot chocolate at night, and it was just a hot chocolate, but that was helping him to be calm. So he was great through that. But the week after, the effects of it came out. And so he was a lot more, he stopped using cutlery again, unless he got it and he washed it. And he wouldn't let me put his clothes in his room that I'd washed, and these OCD traits started to come back. Not that he's got OCD, it comes from, I believe, the kind of autistic burnout, when he's overwhelmed and can't cope, he has to control everything. So I upped the mushrooms, and literally it was incredible. I gave him a drink and I put 10 drops of the mushroom tincture in, and within half an hour you just saw this darkness just shift. It just left. It was like, wow, that's so powerful. And if he doesn't have the mushrooms for a few days, I can see the overwhelm, the anxiety, the anger coming back. He needs it to help his brain actually function properly, to help him be able to make sense and order all of the stuff. And he's so bright, he's super intelligent, he's super creative, he's so good at music and all of these different things. And part of his journey was we got funding for noise solutions, which is amazing. And they did a 12-week program with him, which was phenomenal and really helped him. The school have funded him to do guitar lessons, which have been really helpful. So it's finding these things, but he had to get to a state where he was able to access anything, which for a while he wasn't. So I'm eternally grateful for these different things. But for me, I've seen it, and I've seen it with lots of other people. It's the mushrooms that are so key, but also regulating the sleep, which is so important, and the mushrooms really help with that. So now he's just finishing primary school, he's transitioning to secondary school. He did 3 days last week, and it was a wobble. His anger came back, it was hard, but he made it there. He functioned well. He's now got an EHCP, which has just come through, so they're going to be implementing that come secondary school, come September. And I know I've got to keep an eye on him, because I know that he deregulates easily. But now we've got more tools in place that are helping him. So I'm going to look through the Bach flower remedies and look at making up a new remedy for when he transitions to help support him in that. We've got an art therapist who's amazing, Claire Reeves, you are incredible, in Sudbury. And she's really helping support him as well. He's I didn't mention it, come last January, he started talking to his dad again. So we're back in that. His dad's not so good at the low demands, hasn't quite worked that out, because he didn't have any interaction with him for 1.5 years. So we're working on that family dynamic, connecting everyone together. As I have 2 other children as well, but that's going well. So it's looking at what Eliar needs to support him, how we can help him through it, but knowing what tools are really key. And the mushrooms, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the mushrooms. So reishi mushroom, an amazing mushroom that's very good for reducing stress in the body, supporting the adrenals. So really important in anyone who's in these fight or flight states, to help pull them out of that and support the adrenals so they're not going into adrenal fatigue, adrenal burnout. Reishi also reduces bad estrogens in the body, so helping with the hormone balance, because part of this whole journey, Eliar was going through puberty as well. So that exacerbated everything hugely. Luckily, we're kind of through that. Eliar is going to be 12 in October. So he's still quite young, but we are kind of pretty much through the puberty. He started that quite early. These things all do lots of other functions as well, but I'm just going to summarize a few of them. Reishi and chaga are also very good on heavy metal reduction as well, so radiation, EMFs, all of those things, because a lot of people are more sensitive to the EMFs in their system because they can't detoxify properly, or that the heavy metal load is attracting more of these EMFs. So really good for that. Lion's mane is one of the keys. So lion's mane really helps with cognitive function, an incredible thing for cognitive function, to really allow the brain to kind of filter things properly. Turkey tail is very, very good for the gut, helping with the gut balance, which affects the brain as well. You know, in children on the spectrum, the guts usually are out of balance. So that's why the probiotics are so important. And that's also why the things like turkey tails, which help support the gut being in balance, are really important, so that the gut brain is working properly, so that vagus nerve is being supported. Cordyceps gives you energy, but in a gentle way. It's not like you're going to, not like caffeine or anything, because you don't want them bouncing around the walls, but it's just, it uplifts the being, which so often they need, because they can get quite low and down and depressed quite often. So it's just that uplift, which again is key. So those are the mushrooms in there. So they're all designed to work together in that kind of synergistic way to support. And more research is coming out showing how these mushrooms are support depression, anxiety, the reduction of depressions, anxiety, the reduction of supporting the gut, so that you can increase your production of serotonin and dopamine, because they're mainly made in the gut. You know, lion's mane, how important it is to help the brain actually just function properly. You know, as I'm perimenopausal, I've been taking this as well, and also to deal with my stress through it, because as a carer of someone going through extreme stuff, you know, you have to support yourself. So for me, the CBD has been invaluable to keep me balanced. The mushrooms have been invaluable to keep me balanced. And I've been taking the Bach flower remedies as well. So you can go online, you know, and look at the main 12 Bach flower remedies, and then just read the descriptions and see which ones grab you, and pick 4 of them. And then you can get those 4, and then you get a, you know, like a bottle like this, fill it with water, and then put 4 drops of each of the 4 tinctures in, and then you take 4 drops of this main thing every day. And it's incredible. You know, it's their vibrational essences, but they really work. And so many people that I've recommended it to have come back and said the mushrooms and the Bach flower remedies have made such a change. You know, so I think, you know, you get to a point, don't you, when you're dealing with children who are struggling, where you just want to do anything for them. You just want to help them and help yourself to be able to help them. And for me, it was like, I will move heaven and earth to help my child be the best he can, and to function and to have the best life. And there was one point where I didn't know how that was going to work. I feared for his future. I really did. I feared for his future, because I couldn't see one. And we had a few years of just hell, absolute hell. And I was so upset and depressed and having to keep working. And, you know, my work is supporting people. And it was hard, really hard, when you're going through such turmoil. But I knew I had to keep going. And I had to keep looking for solutions. And the solutions are there, you know, and it's finding what works for your family and for your child. But this has worked really well for me, and it's worked really well for lots of other people who I've told about it. So I hope that's been helpful and useful. You know, I think within all of this, everyone's going through stuff. You know, children's mental health has been hugely affected by the lockdowns and COVID and all this fear, and them being desocialized and deprogrammed. It's hugely impacted on the mental health of a lot of people. And now we're seeing it huge knock-on effects of these things. You know, the waiting lists. It took a year and a half for a psychiatrist to call me to support us, and we were in crisis a year and a half. So I've been funding that through, we managed to get disability allowance for my son, and I've been using that to fund all of his treatment so that he can have it without having to wait. I got a call, I think 2 weeks ago, saying, oh, we're near the top of the waiting list, did we still need help? And I said, what's happened? They said, well, if you're already seeing someone, then we shouldn't switch that. And I agree. So I just wanted to share that and share where I'm at with all of this. You know, LER is so much better, but it's a constant journey, and it's constantly watching and trying to find ways to support him through the challenges that he's going through and that are going to come up. And for me, I'm going to keep researching constantly about how I can support him so he can be the best version of himself. He's an amazing child, as I'm sure everyone's children are. And it's just finding those ways to get through those cracks to then be able to open up their lives for them again. So lots of love to you all.